Hi, welcome to ThinkTech. We are raising public awareness on energy, technology, diversity, and globalization. This show is Center Stage. I am your host, Donna Blanchard, very proud managing director of Kumukuhua Theater. And we are coming to you live from Pioneer Plaza in the heart of downtown Honolulu, very near Kumukuhua Theater. This show is streamed live on ustream.tv and Spreaker.com. And if you would like to check out any of our previous shows, as well as this one in a couple of hours, you can do so at thinktechhawaii.com or on YouTube. Today I am going to be talking with Chris Vandercook. I'm very excited to say that. We'll be with him in just a moment. But I do want to let you know that if you would like to visit us in our studio when we film our shows, just email jay@thinktechhawaii.com and we will hook you up. Chris Vandercook, just in case the name isn't already ringing all kinds of bells with you, he's one of the hosts of The Conversation on Hawaii Public Radio. That's the 8 a.m. show on which show for, by, and about people of Hawaii. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Donna.
I got that off your website.
Well, it must be true then.
I stalked you just a little. I'm so happy to have you here. I've never been on your show myself, but I send people to you.
That's right.
As often as I can, and I think that you're just masterful at your work, and I should know.
Well, I try not to have a method, so I don't really know what that entails, because there's a funny contradiction to doing what I do, which is that as soon as you have a method, it can become a little bit artificial.
Right.
So I told myself when I started doing this, we're getting on 4 years on this radio show, I told myself that if I started to get good at it, I would quit. If that makes any sense.
Oh. In
the sense of having a style that has having a style at all, anything that has atrophied into a formula, then you're not really listening to the person that you're talking with. That's what I'm saying.
Right. And, well, that is your style, as far as I'm concerned, that you really listen, you're present. And that's what I try to do here. I have something of a formula in, the first 15 minutes
Sure.
We usually talk about what you do and then how you do it and why you do it. But if you want to start off talking about why you do what you do, I try to remain flexible.
Well, for years I worked in television news, and I started as a television news camera operator, cameraman.
Oh.
And so I would be kind of the adjunct figure to someone else doing an interview. So I had a great many opportunities to see it done well, and equally valuable opportunities to see it done badly. Yeah. And done badly to me means a list of questions so that you ask question 4 after question 3, no matter what kind of answer you've just gotten.
Yeah.
And I've had some glaring examples in my past career of somebody saying something provocative and then being asked a question that had nothing to do with what they just said. And that, to me, then you can see, especially if you're in the photographer, as I was, you can see a person's face just sort of sag. Well, this guy's not listening to me. Because he didn't hear what I just said.
Yeah, you see it, it's so immediate.
You really do.
It's a visceral reaction to someone who clearly is not with us.
Yeah, the eyes get a sort of a dull sheen over them that indicates, okay, well, I'm going to just say my little formulaic things, but it becomes a mechanical process rather than an interaction.
Yeah, then you can check out. I think that being present in the moment requires a great deal of trust on our parts. I don't know about you, but when I started doing this, I did try to have some questions ready, and I would have notes written out, and then I would find myself trying to look at my notes. That doesn't work out very well while you're in a conversation.
That's the other thing too, is that maintaining, if you're physically in the room with a person, eye contact is everything, because they are looking for a certain amount of reassurance. What am I doing here, right? Yeah. And so somebody throw me a rope here so that I know where I am. It makes a big difference.
Oh, yeah. And, okay, this is why I used to do, part of the reason I used to do pre-interviews, part of it was to educate myself, but to help my guests to feel more comfortable. This is where we're going to go, this is the line. Yeah. And I found that all of the best stuff happened in the pre-interview, and it wasn't happening here.
Right, because now you're attempting to duplicate something There's nothing like the first time for just about anything.
Yeah.
Right?
You are right.
And you know, my main focus in life is as a musician, much of which is improvised music. In blues or jazz, the solo is the thing. You know, having played the melody to a song, I now play my improvised statement. And that's a discipline that demands that you be in the moment and not rely too much on what got you there. I mean, physical skills, what musicians call chops, got you there. But having gotten there, what have you got at that instant in time? And a lot of musicians, when they're recording, for example, will say, oh, you know, I'll never get to what I had on that first take. And I'm sure you've seen this in theater rehearsals.
Oh, yeah.
You repeat something over and over again, and it'll never be as good as it was the first time. And a smart director will say, look, let's come back to that another day.
Mm-hmm. I spent 4 years in college learning how to recapture that first moment, or how to manufacture the first moment successfully.
And for a performer, of course, that's a very different. You don't have that luxury. You can't just sort of tell everybody to go home and come back the next day.
Right.
And you have to kind of create that.
Yeah, and trust that your chops are going to get you through that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, what length of time are you talking with each of your guests?
About 7 or 8 minutes.
I can't even imagine how it is, and this is part of the reason why I think that you're masterful for 7 reasons, and I'm not just blowing sunshine up your skirt. I really think this is why I asked you to be on the show. You are wonderful at helping people to feel comfortable. You do a very nice job of helping people to, I don't want to say sound intelligent, because you have very intelligent people on your show, but sometimes intelligent people don't sound intelligent.
Sure.
When they're out of stasis.
Yeah.
You are so gracious on the show. I believe you help everyone get their point across well.
Everyone, generally, if you haven't gotten someone's story from them, it's your fault. Mm. Everyone's got a story to tell. I don't believe in judging people along a continuum of intelligence or education or anything like that, because I learned over the years in my journalistic career in television that some of the greatest wisdom comes from the most unlikely sources. And you're not going to get that wisdom if you've made any kind of advanced decisions about this guy's got nothing to tell me. If you decide that prophecy will fulfill itself, and you won't get anything.
Yeah.
So there's a real it's really, it's not art in the sense except that it's the art of being human. It's what humans are supposed to do, right? Listen to each other, take an interest in one another, and be pleasantly surprised by the things that happen. The best times in any kind of format like this, I'm sure you've seen this on this show, the best times are the surprises.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that, right?
Yeah, my favorites are when people say, oh, that's a good question, and they go in a direction that they didn't even think they were going to go in, or I never thought about that. Yeah, or when I'm completely surprised and speechless.
And the least interesting moments are when people say the things that they planned to say 3 days ago, because it's like a stale cake by that time, right? And there's a lot of mechanisms today in society to have people prepare interviews, and both Beth Ann Kozlovich, my co-host, and I are kind of in a subtle battle against that. To just loosen up, tell me what comes into your mind. You know your subject, and as long as I can make you confident of that fact, you'll be able to tell me things. You'll be able to surprise yourself. Yeah. And that's more interesting for everyone.
But you only have 7 minutes to do it. My opening is 7 minutes long.
Well, yeah. But it's as an average, I mean, there are times when that's too short, there are times when it's too long, but you have to work in averages, and I think it's probably pretty close to ideal given a format of a show. It's an hour show, 4 interviews per show, other segments as well, but Beth Ann and I each have 2 people to talk to each day. And the idea is for it to present a sort of an overall picture. Premise being, you can learn a great deal about a place by what the people who live in it have to say.
Yeah, yeah,
Very
absolutely.
simple premise, and if you accept the idea that people all over Hawaii are doing interesting things, you're in business.
Everybody in Hawaii is doing something interesting. It's a matter of figuring out what it is, I think.
There's one of my models when the show was first being planned, I ran into one of my old news colleagues, and he said, "What are you going to do on the show?" I said, "I got a couple of interviews per show, 7 minutes in length, arts and culture and feature stories." And he sort of blanched and said, "Are you kidding me? You're going to do 10?" Because in TV terms, that would be creating 10 feature stories a week, researching them, finding out, having a mix of subject matter. How are you ever going to find 10 people a week? And I have to admit, his comments, I said, "I don't know, we'll just have to see." But I've been surprised at how well it has gone and how often new subjects present themselves. There's always that little bit of panic, or suddenly next week are we going to just completely run out of things to talk about, but it hasn't happened so far.
Yeah. Have you ever yearned for more time, for more than 7 minutes with your guests?
Occasionally, but not really in terms of the overall picture, because, as a broadcast guy, I believe in format. And format has a lot of reasons for being in terms of expectations of the audience. A radio audience, a lot of people are driving to work, and they kind of schedule their lives. And people who listen to Hawaii Public Radio tell me this, that when I'm driving to work, I generally get as far as the news, and by the time the news is on, I'm, pulling into my parking place or whatever. So it makes sense to have things obey a structure, just as it would in any other form of endeavor.
Okay, I can accept that. Well, it's true. It does need to be in smaller segments, because usually what I hear on the radio is what I hear when I'm going from the bathroom to the kitchen to make the coffee.
Sure. Sure, it's woven into your daily routine in ways in which you might not even be aware necessarily.
Yeah. When I worked downtown, and for the first year and a half I lived on the island, I lived in Kailua. So I had that drive over to the Poly every day, and I miss my HPR time. When I moved into town, I missed that time that I had with the, well, my schedule is a little later than most people's, but I would often catch the conversation in the morning, and then that jazz drive on the way home at night. I liked that. So we've just got a couple more minutes in this segment. I don't want to cram too much in, but you've been doing the conversation for 4 years.
Getting on 4 years as of next Valentine's Day.
Oh, it started on Valentine's Day. And did Beth Ann start at the same time that you did?
Yeah, Beth Ann is the producer of the show, the originator of the show, executive producer.
Oh, okay.
I think she and Michael Titterton conceived the show, and they wanted a local talk show with 2 hosts. And when Michael called me to ask if I would think about doing the show, he said, and I wish I could do his accent, but he said in his British accent, "We're looking for someone with a sense of irony." I thought, this is my lucky day, because usually a sense of irony is not something that most employers welcome, right?
Right.
That's all I need, is some sarcastic dude on my staff, And
well, but the host of a show, that is where you want it, if you're going to have it on your staff, right?
Yeah, I think I understand. Years later, I sort of understand what he meant in terms of a sort of a leavening of the atmosphere.
Yeah, a leavening of the atmosphere. I like that. Oh, okay, we're going to go to the first break.
Fair enough.
We will be right back with Center Stage. I'm Donna Blanchard, Managing Director of Kumukuhui Theater, and I'm talking with HPR's Chris Vandercook. We'll be right back.
Aloha, this is Martin Despang, co-host of the Urban Transcendence show by Alejandra Yamashita and Martin Despang. And me being an architect and an educator in architecture, I'm really interested in that we make our urban environment here in downtown Honolulu as exciting, invigorating, and challengingly beautiful as our wonderful paradise natural environment. I'm going to bring in guests, we're going to bring in guests from a diversity of areas that help us to learn how we can achieve that goal that shouldn't be that hard to reach. So we look very much forward to see you then. Thank you.
Hi, we're back. This is Center Stage on ThinkTech Hawaii, and I am Donna Blanchard, proud Managing Director of Kumukuhui Theater, talking with Chris Vandercook, who is so much more than just HPR's Chris Vandercook. I'd like to get into that now. Can we go back to, were you interested in media when you were in high school?
Yeah, I was probably the first field of endeavor I got really focused on was photography, and sort of came out of high school as an aspiring photojournalist. And that led me to, after college, that led me to trying to do some of my own 16 millimeter, and we were shooting 16 millimeter in those days, try to do my own 16 millimeter documentary films. And one of the first projects I took on was a documentary about blues, as it was in America in the summer of 1970, which is when I shot my first really extensive doc. A documentary that sadly has never been completed for a lot of reasons.
Oh,
but
that's heartbreaking.
I did, yeah. But I spent, well, in part, it's largely my fault, so I'd love to be able to blame someone else, but it led me down a different life path in a sense, because over a weeks of preparation and a weekend of performance at a blues festival in the Midwest, I got to meet a great many musicians and formed a particularly sort of influential friendship with a up-and-coming blues artist of the time named Luther Allison. And I ended up, a year or so later, getting a house in Madison, Wisconsin, with the members of Luther's band, all good friends of mine. And I found myself sort of drawn into the world of blues performance and being encouraged by my friends to develop my own guitar playing and singing and become a blues artist myself.
Oh, okay, now wait a minute. We need to back up just a little further. Did you come from a musical family?
Not particularly, no.
Had you been exposed to a lot of blues at home?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And did you know, I mean, were you a shower singer?
No, and singing only came to me, and it's still coming, I hope. But I only sang as a default I'll give myself an excuse to play my guitar.
Okay.
Which is, I think, what a lot of blues guitarists do. If you want to do the songs you want to do, you better sing them, or else you're going to end up to some degree of compromise.
Oh.
But my world is the sort of one of many thousands of descendants of people like B.B. King, T-Bone Walker, where the guitar is a sort of a counterpoint voice to the vocal, and you sing a line, play a line, answering it on the guitar, back and forth. Kind of two voices in a sense, but you accompany yourself with the guitar, but you also have that as a kind of a lead, almost a speaking voice.
Oh, that's an interesting way to put it. Okay.
You hear that in B.B. King's work.
Yeah, you do. Now
he
that I'm
sings,
thinking about
you know,
it.
I've got a sweet little angel, and then his guitar talks back to him. Yeah, those little plinkety-plink sounds. That's where I live, in that arena of sound.
So but I'd like to go back even a little bit further. Photojournalism. Do you remember the first time you got excited about a photo and what you learned from that?
My father had been a Second World War correspondent. and he had been with Eisenhower's forces after Normandy. He'd also traveled all over the world and written books about places all over the world, which were illustrated with his photographs. So in the attic of our house, I had thousands of photographs to just sort of comb through of African tribes and, you know, New Guinea in the 1930s and Liberia in the early 1920s. And he had a Leica rangefinder, which is the classic handheld 35 millimeter photography of the great photojournalists of the period between the wars, Cartier-Bresson, people like that.
Okay.
So, in many ways, some of my heroes growing up were the photographers for Life magazine. Henri Cartier-Bresson, Alfred Eisenstadt, Margaret Bourke-White, people like that. They were rock stars to me.
And you recognize, I don't know any of those names because looking at those names, never really meant that much to me because I didn't realize what they were doing, the value of what they were doing. I took them for granted, I think.
But you know, they became really a part of our, if you look back on what our images are of the 20th century, you won't be looking too far before you see Robert Capa's photographs at Normandy, or David Douglas Duncan's photographs of Pablo Picasso. You know, there's a great photographer can really become a very distinctive presence who learns to let his subject really dictate what's going on in the frame. Your ego can't supersede the subject. You have to be a kind of vessel. But that was one of my first loves anyway, photojournalism.
So, and you were exposed to a lot of blues music, so you really learned about telling stories and receiving information in different ways.
Yeah, and particularly through, by spending a lot of time with people like Luther Allison, who were not that far off Luther was only a few years older than me, and I went to probably hundreds of his gigs. I learned that it's a very interactive art form. That particular playing the blues with a band in a bar is about a very interactive kind of experience. If it's a real rowdy blues bar, it's an amazing sort of cathartic sharing experience, which, you know, hooked me early, still does. It's not that easy to reproduce that atmosphere anymore.
How often does that happen here?
Almost never. Almost never.
You need a festival or something.
What I've done in recent years is try to do concerts with a specific theme, so that people have, you know, since they can't go to a bar like the Nitty Gritty in Madison, Wisconsin, where I kind of got my start, you have to sort of give the music some context. The last concert I did with my band was called The Three Kings, which is about three of the principal guitarist singers of the blues era, B.B. King, Albert King, and Freddie King. And guitarists of my stripe really look at them as the three best, to the degree that isn't too much of an oversimplification. But three great artists, great tunes, that gave me a sort of a peg on which to hang, an excuse for a concert. So I'm trying to do things like that with more, having a bit of a theme, so people sort of have a little bit of a window into what you're doing.
Yeah. They're more likely, the artists as well as the audience that is going to be able to lend that atmosphere are more likely to be there?
Yeah. For the blues aficionado, when you listen to Muddy Waters, B.B. King, any of the artists that we consider the great ones, you're having a very sort of specific communion with a distinct personality. I mean, B.B. King, if you listen to a lot of his music, he's someone you know. He tells you about his troubles, and sometimes he's up and sometimes he's down. He's just like you.
But he's a little more public. Well, sometimes I'm pretty public. But
well, he's expressing what you'd like to be able to express.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And he's a surrogate in a sense, and that's what the interaction is about.
Do you write music also?
Never been, a few things, I've never been that successful at it.
So you're mostly doing covers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reinterpreted.
With your own interpretation?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so thank you for going back with me through that. You moved in with the band members in Wisconsin. Where did you grow up? Where did you start?
New York City.
Oh, okay. Oh, and then you went to Wisconsin. But it was near Chicago.
It seemed like a good idea at the time.
Okay. And then I can't get this thought out of my head. When I lived in Chicago for 10 years, I grew up just outside of Chicago, and one of the best blues bars I've ever been to is in Nashville, Bourbon Street in Nashville. I love that place. Anyway, that was the kind of atmosphere that makes me think of that rowdy, where we were just at one with the people on the stage for that one first evening.
And there are very few entertainment or cultural experiences quite like it. When you've heard a great blues show from Little Milton or Bobby Blue Bland or any of these guys, you can't duplicate that experience any other way.
Yeah, yeah, it's very unique.
Yeah.
Okay, so where are you moving next on that trajectory? We're in Madison, and you're learning a lot. You're playing with these guys.
Yeah, and just when and pretty much slowly starving to death, because it's not an area where you get rich. And a job came along in television at a key moment when I was down to my last Pop-Tart. A job came along, and suddenly I had a career that I hadn't really planned on, but I loved doing news. Still do. I became, a photojournalist in television. In the early days of video cameras, when I first started in television, we were still shooting 16mm film for the nightly news, and then video cameras came in. We all switched to those. But I spent about the next 15, 20 years doing that.
How does a job in television come along? Because probably a lot of people that wouldn't happen to them, and they might want it to.
A break came along, and I had a photographic background, and like most people who get jobs, I lied at the key strategic moment, or not quite a lie, perhaps, but somebody said, "Have you ever used a video camera?" I said, "Oh, of course." How hard can it be?
Awfully cheeky there, Chris.
Well, I mean, it has a lens, and you put your eye up to it, and you focus it, and, how hard can it be, right?
Yes.
And that's pretty much how it worked out.
That's how, okay. And, okay, so you started working then you were a video journalist. Yeah? Yeah,
they did, in those days, you were just a cameraman, they hadn't tarted up the name as video journalist or any of that yet. Those euphemisms all came later.
Okay. I didn't want to say anything politically incorrect, but all right, you were the guy with the camera on your shoulder. You're the liar with the camera.
Right.
But we deferred to the question, didn't really deserve an honest answer anyway. So, and then how did you get out of Wisconsin?
My best friend from college had come to Hawaii and gone into the same profession. He and I had both done our early documentary efforts together, and it was sort of made a lot of logical sense that we would end up doing this as our work. And so we kind of reconnected after a few years, and one of the things about working in Wisconsin in a news capacity is frequently 30 below wind chill is the news, and if you need pictures of it, you have to go outside. And that's where they kind of lost me. I had many hair-raising wintertime experiences over the years shooting news in Wisconsin, and after about the 5th or 6th winter doing it, I was pretty royally sick of it. And a job came up, the possibility of a job came up in Hawaii. Didn't have a job, came here without one. Took my guitar amplifier, took the speaker out, sold it, stuck my clothes inside the amp, had my guitar as the other suitcase, sold pretty much everything that I could sell, arrived with, a few $100 and a place to stay, and
That's all you needed.
dove into the void, which was here.
Nice. My story is a little similar in that I didn't bring a whole lot, but I had a job
Yeah,
when I came here.
That's a big difference, as I soon learned. It didn't take long for panic to set in
Yeah.
upon arrival, but what are you going to do, right?
Whatever you can.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to go to our next break.
Okay.
We're going to come right back here. You are watching Center Stage on the ThinkTech Hawaii Digital Series. I'm Donna Blanchard, and I'm talking with Chris Vandercook, and we will be right back.
Aloha, hello. My name is Hong Jiang, and I host ThinkTech Asia every Tuesday afternoon at 4 p.m. At our show, we talk about issues that are important in Asia, such as environment, culture, history, religion. We broadcast live, and we're also on Olelo 54. Make sure to tune in, and we'll see you there. Thank you. Goodbye.
Hi, we're back. This is Center Stage on the ThinkTech Hawaii Digital Series. I'm Donna Blanchard, proud managing director of Kumukuhoi Theater, and I am talking with Chris Vandercook of HPR and the blues music scene, and the guy with the camera on his shoulder. Okay, so you come to Hawaii, and what opening did you find?
Well, I started, after a few months of panic, I started working at Channel 2 toward the end of 1982. Hurricane Eva was one of the milestones of my news. It was one of the first big events I can remember shooting, as we all did back in those days. And I was there for 9 years and eventually became a producer, so that I wasn't running around out in the field anymore. I was writing the show, kind of putting the show together. Started to integrate my writing into what I was doing.
Oh, telling the story.
Yeah.
But now, wait a minute, I have to ask you to back up again, because if you come out and you don't have a job, and you said you got a little panicky, but you didn't start working at McDonald's. You didn't go wait tables like I did in Chicago after I got my bachelor's degree in acting.
I had a few bizarre, short professional episodes.
Okay, so you did have a little bit of that, but you
Yeah.
really kept your eye on the prize.
Yeah.
It sounds like. I
Yeah.
mean, you knew where you were going to go. Did you ever seriously entertain the thought of going into a different field?
I'm sure I would have had the opportunity come along, but but by that time I was 5 or 6 years into a profession that wasn't that widespread. I had a pretty decent skill set.
Can I ask you, if you had to do something else, if you had to get out of media, what would you do?
I might write, although writing is excruciating for me.
I've had some writers on the show,
Yeah.
and that's pretty excruciating too.
It is. Well, if you try to do it well, it's excruciating. One of my literary heroes is the humorist S.J. Perelman, who said, "Easy writing is difficult reading," and I think he's absolutely right.
Yes.
So I don't know if you have to suffer, but I certainly do.
And you would write fiction, nonfiction?
I would have to be nonfiction. I don't think I have any gift for fiction at all.
Oh. Okay. Interesting.
More a matter of knowing how to craft a sentence.
Okay.
I had some good teachers back in the day. Everyone in my family was a writer. Everyone.
Okay.
The dogs were writers.
You're still in the same, genus of careers, though.
Mhm.
If you say writing, so nothing else
Communication.
out there. Yeah, communication.
It would be, yeah.
It's just part of who you are, isn't it?
I suppose.
Yeah.
In an odd way, I've sort of cycled back to what my father did. He was a writer who became a radio news commentator, a little bit by accident, with the onset of the Second World War. In fact, some of his early broadcasts are about Hawaii, because he had been to Hawaii and the Pacific, and he knew the Pacific pretty well. And at the outset of war, he was called upon by NBC to come in and talk about what was going on in the Pacific, because there were places where the war was heading where no one else available to them had been. He's actually was on the air December 7th.
Oh, really?
On NBC Radio, and some of his broadcasts. I have some of his broadcasts that I've tracked down on the web.
Oh, wow. In what market? Where was
Nationwide. I mean, this was the National Broadcasting Company. When
wow.
during the war they divided into what they called the red and blue networks, and so by the time he was, by the time of the Normandy invasion, June 1944, he was broadcasting from London over what they called the Blue Network, but it's what is now NBC.
Oh, okay.
And of course, this is when radio was the
place.
worldwide medium.
Yeah. Okay, so now you are producing a show with CBS. Did you say Channel 2? Sorry,
I
in
became
Chicago, CBS
yeah.
is Channel 2. That's why.
I became a news producer during my last couple of years at Channel 2.
Okay.
And then I did some of that for Channel 9 a year or so later. But I quite liked the idea of, I liked the job of writing the shows, kind of producing, determining news content.
And, well, there's so many questions that could go along with that, but I don't have enough time. Because I do have to say, when you get into determining content, well, that's a pretty powerful position you've gotten into. You've come a long way from being the guy with the camera on his shoulder.
Well, in any good newsroom, every member of the team is a daily participant in the decisions that are made. You might not always get listened to, but you can definitely. I was part of some good news operations where everyone spoke their mind, which wasn't that wonderful when I was the guy making decisions, because everyone would criticize. But that's how it should work. We had very I worked at 4 different television news operations over the years, and in every one of them there was a very freewheeling exchange of ideas about everything. So it was like, I can't believe you're leading with that story. Why aren't you leading with this story? And it would never end. And it's good training, because you'll never be right about everything. But it's, as with anything that resolves into a performance, you have to just sort of live with what just happened and get ready for the next one. You see this all the time, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, there are disasters, there are triumphs, and what matters, by the time the 6 o'clock news ends, your focus is the 10 o'clock news that's coming up very quickly.
Yeah.
So you also learn how to build from your successes, but also to take mistakes, failures, whatever you call them, in stride to the point where you can function. As with theater, right?
Right.
Disastrous performance, so what? I mean, there's a matinee tomorrow.
You got to keep going, and you hope it galvanizes something, and
Yeah.
you're 10 times better the next time.
And it will. You've all seen that. You have the thing of the bad dress rehearsal, the great opening night, and vice versa.
Yeah, sometimes.
Right.
Sometimes that second night of the show can be a bit of a dive.
Sure.
We do everything we can to avoid that. So now I'm thinking so when you became the producer, you stepped into quite a leadership role. Is there any correlation between that leadership and the leadership playing your guitar with a group on stage?
Yes. It's the band leader's responsibility to kind of tell everybody what page we're on. But maybe leadership is almost too strong a word. It's sort of the head guide, the frontier scout, who's kind of the first one to see what that is ahead at the next bend. And it's very easy in a, quote, leadership position to take away from the skills of the people on your team without meaning to, right? You can inadvertently sort of suppress what other people are doing. If they don't know what you want, they might sort of hang back and not give everything they've got, because they're not sure how you're going to take it and if it fits into what your scheme is. So you have to, like a director, you have to sort of create an atmosphere where everybody knows what you want, but past a certain point, it's them that's doing it. There are 5 other musicians on stage, and I don't know how to play the piano. So past a certain point, I need from you to play the piano really well on these songs. And my job is to tell you that this is the song we're doing, and this is kind of how it goes. But beyond that, I want to be, pleasantly surprised by everyone's efforts within the ensemble.
So you're enabling it without pushing too hard. You're
delivering
the
it really is
opportunity.
there's a fine line to be found. Everyone's searching for it. Everyone does it in a different way. But one of my role models as a band leader is the late Miles Davis, who had great jazz groups, and the members of his groups would say later, and he had some of the greatest musicians of the whole 20-year period that he was in his heyday, went through his groups and then went on to great success on their own. And some of them would say, I played for Miles for 5 years and he never said more than 2 paragraphs worth of words to me the whole time. But I knew what he wanted. And I knew that if he didn't like something that I would, I could tell by the look on his face or whatever. But one of the things that he once said to he had a very young band in the 1960s, including a drummer. This was probably the band in jazz now at the time. The 1960s Miles Davis Quintet was probably the most celebrated group in jazz. He brought in a drummer who was 15 years old, Tony Williams, a great drummer who's now revered as one of the greatest who ever lived. But at the time, he was just a kid. And everybody thought, are you kidding?
Crazy.
He could have anybody in the world. He's got this child, And Tony later said that what Miles told him was, I want all of you in the band to sound as if you're just this side of making a mistake. I think that could apply really well to theater and just about any endeavor.
I like to ski that way.
Just this side of, yeah, there you go, skiing, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, that's a good analogy. Just this side of making a mistake. Because fear of making a mistake, what does that do? Closes you in, right? Caution. Who wants caution from somebody who's performing?
Not
Please.
I.
Exactly. A cautious Stanley Kowalski in Streetcar, come on, it just wouldn't work.
So is that how you would lead when you were producing? Do you think that was already within you?
It's hard to say. I mean, the thing that dictates how you, and something that is strictly as constrained as producing a television news program, there's only one determinant to what the content is, and that's what happened today.
Right. Yeah.
So you really, it's not a place where you can impose much of yourself. And it's, on most days, there's pretty close to a consensus as to what the news stories of interest are. So you can't really build yourself up too much as a decision maker, because most of the time, the big 3-alarm fire is the story. How do you cover the story, and what are the aspects of it that you cover?
You're still collaborating with the team
And there's
story.
so many other people that are contributing to it. So it is what are the best people to deploy? Where do you put them? What do you get out of them? How much time do you allot? Things like that. It's a traffic cop.
Yeah.
In a sense, but you can't really claim to any authorship. You shouldn't. It's news. News is what happened. You're a vessel for what happened. How do you convey that accurately? The job is to be accurate, not to be
engaging.
not to be distinct. Engaging, of course.
Yeah.
But there's nothing more engaging than accuracy in journalism, right?
Yeah. Wow. Now wait a minute. Sometimes depends on what the story is. Right. You can find ways to engage me while maintaining that accuracy.
Sure.
So this gives me a little bit insight into, I think that this is, what I'm hearing is part of the reason why you are so very good at what you do on the conversation on HPR is that you are collaborating, you have a collaborative spirit, and you are not pushing too hard, you're giving people a lot of trust, you're leading, you're staying on in the moment, and then allowing that to unfold, and you have a great reverence for the accuracy of the story.
Well, it's the same job. It is the same job. It's let's find out what's going on. What's required of you to find out what's going on? A certain amount of curiosity, a certain amount of background knowledge, but not a lot. Just enough so that you don't make a complete fool of yourself on whatever the subject is at hand. But
Yeah.
it isn't that research intensive a job as long as you come into it with a pretty broad background of general knowledge. What's required of you is curiosity.
Yes. Yes, I feel that way. That's why I invite people like you onto the show, because I'm curious to talk with you. And thank you so much for doing this. I'm sorry that we're out of time, and I think we're missing about 10 years of your life, if I'm correct.
I don't miss them.
we didn't get you from the year 2000 to the year 2010, but you'll have to come back sometime.
Sure.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for being here.
My
I
pleasure.
really appreciate the opportunity to learn about you. Thank you for watching. There's a few more people I would like to thank. I would like to thank our stage manager, Sachi Slomov. Sorry, I pronounced your name wrong. I would like to thank our production manager, Zuri Bender, who is in my ear, Chrissy Goffigan, who Chrissy Goffin handles our communications, and I would also like to thank Jay Fidel, who somehow manages to put it all together. We are coming to you from Pioneer Plaza in the heart of downtown Honolulu. If you would ever like to join us in our studio audience, email Jay at thinktechhawaii.com. We'll see you next week.